by this Maimer on Ois Bay's page Vav, second page of the Maimer. We had a series of questions that we asked on the first pasuk of our parsha, like Yimakes Nasayim Yomim. Why does it say Nasayim Yomim? A series of questions that he asked over there. Why was Pari Yomid Allah Yair to say that he has control over the Yair? And why was it important to emphasize the 2 years? What does the 2 years have to do with Pari's dream? What about the other 10 years that he sat in prison? And why does the parsha begin with this? It's a series of questions that he has. Now, Ois Beis, he's going to start explaining the idea of the Shasayim Yomim, how they are beruchtis. You have to first explain the general idea that it's at the end of 2 years. Moving, but also the emphasis actually over here is going to be on the word Yomim. Similar to one of the questions we asked before, why does he even have to add the word Yomim? He could have just said the Kate Shnasayim. So the Kamuva Bayra Torah, she has a Shnei Perush word Yomim, the Kates Shnasayim Yomim, the Kates with Yomim indicates there's 2 ways of explaining. This corresponds to 2 types of ways of a Kates. That were explained in the Zohar, I've mentioned in the Zohar. Kates HaYomim, where it says Kates HaYomim with a mem, the small one. That's actually something from the left side showing that it's something that's negative. It's not a positive thing. Then the Kates HaYomim, the end of the right, which is a pasuk that says the meal, because the meal is in Aramaic, and in Aramaic the mems get switched for a nun. So even though in the literal sense it still means end of days, but it indicates a positive thing, a right. And Kates HaYomim indicates a negative thing as the left, as we'll soon explain why Kates HaYomim indicates left and negative. The second one in page Zion, Zohar Kampirish, here the Zohar explained by him the Kates Fulu, the Ihu Kates the smaller. It says over here, it was at the end, it's talking about the end of the left, says the Zohar. This also seems to be indicated in Torah. But he explained what does it mean at the end of 2 years, days. And will mean the conclusion, the finishing, the stopping of the 2 years days. What does that mean? So we can explain how days itself is a positive thing, and there's an end to that positive. So therefore, the phrase in general, Miketz Nasayim Yomim, is a negative. He says, Peter, this means that it will cease and end by him the level of Torah. What does Torah have to do with it? Torah is the level of 2 years, days. Why? Because like it says in Shir HaShirim, Torah proclaims the it's a mission. Torah proclaims I'm a plaything, I'm a toy, I'm an enjoyment for Hashem, day. In other words, 2 days is the place of the Torah. What's it mean 2 days is the place of the Torah? It's a statement of 2,000 years the Torah preceded the world. Because a day in Hashem's 1,000 years in Hashem's eyes is a day. So therefore when it says the was a plaything.
Rabbi Bart?
Yes.
The audio has gotten worse.
Well, I guess I could be because I'm on the road. I don't think there's anything.
Are you using a microphone or the phone itself?
I have headphones.
Maybe you could talk straight into the phone. Might be a headphone thing.
Might do that. We'll see if that works. Even though previously when you said that worked nice, it seemed to be doing fine then. Okay.
Now it's good.
So
now it's really good.
Again, so he says that Shnasayim Yomim
that
Could
since
you
it's
back
the
up
idea of
back up a little bit? Because I couldn't really
can't
get
hear
the
you.
last.
What?
Could you back up about
What?
a minute? Could you back up about a minute?
You want me to back up? Okay. So he says from line 3. This idea that the end of Shnasayim Yomim is a negative, something having to do from the left side. It's Mashra from Torah Ursh, Pirish Mekate Shnasayim Yomim, because he explains at the end of years, 2 years, days, Lashon Seif Tichla LeBechinas Shnasayim Yomim. It's an end and a conclusion and a stoppage of the 2 years' days. What does that mean? What's ending? What's stopping? What stopping is a positive thing. We're going to say that Yomim is Torah, and we're saying Mikate, the end, the stopping of Torah, that's a negative. It'll cease by him, heaven forbid, the level of the Torah, that's a level of 2 years' days. Where do we see that Torah is associated with the phrase of days? Like it says in Mishlei, I will be a plaything by Hashem, a pleasurable thing by Hashem. Mishlei says, in the name of the Torah is called day, I will be a plaything by him. And we know that by Hashem, 1,000 years is like a day. So that's the source for the Maimer Chazal that says, Alpaim Shana Kadma Torah Lo'ilam, that 2,000 years the Torah preceded the world. So Shnasayim Yomim, these 2 years, which are actually the 2 days, these are the 2 days of Torah, and Kate Shnasayim Yomim, the end of those 2 days, that means that it ceased, that it stopped, that there is no more, the Torah stopped Chas v'Sholom. Messiah, and he concludes over there, I believe in Torah, over time, this ceasing of the Torah, when Torah ceases, so that results eventually into Pari's dreaming. So there's a very obvious connection that you go from Chas v'Sholom Torah stopping to a level of open klippa like Pari. This means, says in line 10, that is an unwanted thing, a negative thing. The idea of Kate Hayamim, that's connected with the left side, with the end of days. That is one interpretation, one way of looking at this phrase, Mekate Shnasayim Yomim, that it's a negative. And then it leads in very well. Why is Pari dream at the end of that? Because that's all the klippa type of situation. Could the Torah of the Arizal explains through Kates Hayomin. That what does it mean, Kates Hayomin? Like I mentioned, in Tanil it uses the term Kates Hayomin. Yamin means right. So too it's the Mashmois from the Medrash Rabbah on the Pasuk that it says by Himekates. This is what it says. He placed an end to darkness. And the Medrash goes on to explain. Hashem established a date, a time, an expiration date. How long will the world go on in darkness? As long as the Yetzer Hara is in the world, there's darkness in the world. When the Yetzer Hara is uprooted from the world, so then darkness is uprooted from the world. So therefore, since the Medrash is saying this on this pasuk by Mekate, so that means the Medrash is identifying the Mekate Shnasayim Yomim with a positive thing, with the idea that the darkness of Klippa and the Yetzer Hara will eventually cease. Imtza line 17 comes out, because of Mekate, what it says, it will be at the end. It's just like what it says, that he will place an end to the darkness. And the Seifa goals, that means the end of the goals. So in Kate Yamin, that's the idea of the end of the right. It's a positive thing. Another explanation he has in Medrash Rabbah. That's another positive aspect of Kates. Beforehand, we were talking about Kates in the big picture, the darkness of Klippus and Golus, the Klippus and Yitzhahara is going to cease. In micro, it was specifically the darkness of Yosef being imprisoned. Even, and that's why it says Vehime Kates. Kates. As soon as that end of time, when Yosef was supposed to be up till that time imprisoned, immediately Pari dreamed. Until from the imprisonment he went out to reign, to go into to become a king, a viceroy, etc. We need to understand the connection and association between the two explanations. Now, really, it's three explanations, but most probably what he's referring to is the two explanations. One is positive, one is negative. One is that through the end of Torah, that's how Pari Cholim, and one is through the end of the darkness of Yosef, you have just the opposite. That's why the Pari is dreaming. This will be understood by first prefacing what's explained in the Sefer Oira Torah to Samach Tzedek. The ultimate purpose of the descent of Yosef to Mitzrayim, like it says, but Yosef were Mitzrayim. Yosef was descended, brought down into Egypt. That's through that it should become easier for the Klal Yisrael should become the Golus easier. In other words, there could have been many different reasons why they would have gone down to Golus. For example, just fell into my mind. Let's say Yosef would not have been in charge over there, but still, because of the famine, they might have had to travel over there and for whatever reason settle over there. Still in all, Hashem made it in such a way that first Yosef was settled over there, and by him, laying the groundwork, so even afterwards, when the Bnei Yisrael came, when the whole family came, it was much easier on them to go. Line 27. And not like you could imagine that Yosef was the entire reason why they went down to Mitzrayim. So he says in the parentheses, though in actuality the descent to Mitzrayim was through Yosef. Yosef was what it hinged on, their whole descent. We still in all it still was not the cause of the descent. Even if Yosef would have never come down to Mitzrayim, the Bnei Yisrael would have had to come down to Mitzrayim. Like the Chazal say in the Haggadah, we say this every Pesach, page Ches. Yaakov was worthy of and should have descended to Mitzrayim, even if it would have taken B'shal Shaloi, Shal Barzel, and iron chains. In other words, Yaakov had to descend to Egypt. The Bnei Yisrael had to descend to Egypt. It could have been done a hard way. It could have been done, Chas v'Shalom, Yaakov would have been taken captive, and his family would have been taken captive. Or it could have been done in a more honorable way, where Yosef, who was the viceroy of Mitzrayim, would invite them in and make them comfortable, etc., etc. So he says in line 2 on page Ches, but just the opposite. That it's not what seems to be that Yosef was the cause of the descent, but he was the cause of making the Gullus easier. Until he affected the empowerment for the Yidden to leave Egypt. This was accomplished through Yosef refining and elevating the sparks of holiness that were in Mitzrayim. This is what it says about Yosef, that when they were, the Egyptians ran out of money or just throw away cash to be able to buy food. So then, Vayilakid Yosef is Kola Kesav Animta Beretz Mitzrayim Beretz Canaan. Yosef Tzaddik was able to collect all the money that was there in Mitzrayim and all the money that was in Eretz Canaan. That's the idea of Biran and Tzoitzes, of elevating the sparks from Mitzrayim and Eretz Canaan. The entire silver and gold, or money and gold, that was in the entire world, Yosef collected it and brought it to Mitzrayim because the whole world was starving, and the only way they could sustain themselves was to pay Yosef for the food. So therefore, what happened was that all the money of the entire world was now elevated through Yosef Tzadi. There's a medrash that says that there was so much riches that Yosef collected over those years of famine from the entire world that he was able to make 3 different treasures that eventually was passed around, was passed over or discovered by other people. Korach discovered one of these treasures of loot and money and so on, and another one was Antonius, and another one is reserved for tzaddikim, Mashiach's times. In other words, that's how much riches he brought in over here. Line 18, when the Yidden went up from Mitzrayim, they took it with them, all that money and all those sparks that Yosef had collected from the entire world. Like it says, they emptied out Mitzrayim. This is also what it says, that also a mixed multitude. He went up with them, and we know the Rav is going to Koyal Reish Beis Nitzoitzes Merapach Nitzoitzes Nisparu Begos Mitzrayim. There was 202 sparks that were elevated and removed and redeemed from Mitzrayim out of the 288 total sparks that came down here into this world during creation that needs to be elevated. The Golus Mitzrayim was the most difficult exile. Therefore, the majority of sparks were elevated then, and the rest of the 86 of the 288, those are spread out over the rest of the easier Golus than there was in the Golus Mitzrayim. The Rebbe goes on further. Why was it then the time of the main halos on its sites? It's the main elevations of the sparks. He says in line 16. But he says, in addition to this, since Golus Mitzrayim we know is the root for all the exiles, meaning it includes in it, and all the exiles are only branches of Golus Mitzrayim. So therefore it's not considered the medrash amongst the 4 exiles. That they are the 4 exiles of the exile in Bavel, the exile of Madai, which is on the Yovan, the Greek exile, just with Hanukkah. Edom is the present exile. Why isn't he mentioned? Why, when the Medrash enumerates all the exiles, doesn't it enumerate Mitzrayim as one of them? Because Mitzrayim is the general one, the because Mitzrayim is the source that includes everything, like the expression of Chazal, that the klal only has what the prat is. So in other words, it's really all the same, all the details is really a reflection of that big Mitzrayim goes. And in movement, so it's understood that Rebbe goes on line 20. Shapulas Yosef appeared on its sites is the effect of Yosef in refining the sparks. Joyce and this koyach legula Mitzrayim, that was an empowerment for the redemption from Mitzrayim. It was also an empowerment for the redemption of all the exiles, because Mitzrayim was the root for all the exiles. So whatever Yosef accomplished in Mitzrayim, by extension, he accomplished and helped out with all the other exiles. Ad legula asid, until the future redemption, including the future redemption. They that will take place, all the exiles that were becoming redeemed, including the future redemption, is through refining the last 86 sparks of the 288 sparks that were not refined when the Eden left Mitzrayim. We were empowered to refine those 86 that were left over from the refinement that we did of the 202 in the times when we went out of Mitzrayim. Line 25. All of this, in addition to the fact in the Vayalak that the idea that Yosef is also an empowerment for the avodah out of love, because kesef, silver, the word kesef in Hebrew is a same word like kama nichsef nichsafti, nichsef of gam kolsa nafshi, that I desired Hashem. So by Yosef collecting the kesef from Mitzrayim, he empowered us to the idea of love. Like it's explained in the Torah that kesef, silver, shows on love. It's a kol echad v'echad Yisrael b'zman hagolus. He empowered every single yid in the time of Golus to be able to have the idea of the love of Hashem. Any question? Top of page S, first line. The reason why all of this took place through Yosef specifically, because the level of Yosef is the most highest level of all the levels of all the Shvat. The idea behind this is it's known the difference between Yosef to all the other tribes, even the difference between Yosef and the Avos and the forefathers. The Shvatim had to be in a state of separation from the world. They couldn't interact and engage in the world, not to the degree that Yosef did. Why couldn't they interact with the world? So the matters of this world should not disturb them from their service of Hashem. Therefore, they chose to be shepherds. Opposed to Yosef was the total assent and cleaving to godliness. It's because of that despite being engaged in the world and involved in the world, he could still connect with Hashem. Therefore, he was able to rule over the earth. And he was able to give food to all the nations of the earth, to entire people of the earth. And without your permission, without your say-so of Yosef, no one can raise their hand and foot and do anything. That also what it says that he came home to do his work, to do actual work, the work of Egypt, the most immoral place of the earth. All of this, being engaged in the work of Egypt, did not disturb him from his avodah. Why was that so? Because matters of this world was not an existence that had any significance by him whatsoever. Since the world did not have any significance to him, so therefore he was not appropriated by the world. He was not taken in by the world and grasped by the world and limited by the world. And like this is explained in the Maimer of Vayhi of the Rebbe Rashab from the year 1919, or the end of 1918, and there's also more wondrous, unique and novel insights in this topic in that Maimer. The Rebbe is trying to whet our appetite to look at that Maimer. The Rebbe goes on to say, line 19, close, but that the general idea behind this is Yosef was the way of rest. Therefore, he had the capability, the effect, the empowerment for redemption from Mitzrayim, until the future redemption. In other words, his level was similar to what we've been speaking about the other Mamar before this, Ada B'Shalom. He did not engage in a way of a battle and a give and take. Therefore, he was able to empower even the future redemption, which is about Ada B'Shalom. Because when Mashiach comes to be the ultimate level of rest, how much more so from Shlomo Melech, Shlomo Yish, Shalom, Shektet, Yamav, The pasuk says that his name will be Shalom. His name is Shlomo, and peace and calmness and quietude I will place on the Yidden in his days. Before the Ramaskal Pada V'Shalom, I'm sorry, like explained in the Maimer entitled Pada V'Shalom, the Mittler Rebbe, how the level of Shlomo Melech was 1 degree of peace, Pada V'Shalom and Menucha, and how Mashiach's times it's even more so. It says in line 27, "Well, Pizeh Yuban Akesher V'Shayich B'Shnei Perushim from Medrash." Point is to be understood the connection between the two explanations the Medrash has. The first explanation is Kate Sablachoshe. He placed an end to the darkness. Hashem designated how much time in the world, how much time the world will be in darkness. Top of page Yud. The second explanation is Man Nasli Yosef. He gave a portion time for Yosef. How much time he will be in darkness in imprisonment. Yosef while Yosef was imprisoned, Paul Yosef closed in Nabirudim. Yosef affected the general idea of refining of the sparks by Dezeh. Paul indicates through that, by his refinement of the sparks, while being imprisoned, he affected the idea of the darkness being made an end to it. Because, like we said before, what Yosef did in Mitzrayim was a precursor and a shoyrish and a source for all the redemptions, including Mashiach's times. So what Yosef did, and his starting of that end, that beginning process of the end of darkness, was also empowering every single Yid. No, the pasuk, the entire Klal Yisrael is called by the name Yosef. Remember, like it says, Noye Katzayin Yosef. He leads them as sheep. Yosef, in other words, Yosef, the people of Yisrael, he leads them like you lead around sheep. So he's saying, Shaydei close, goes through the general avoid of the Yidden in the time of exile. Beginning from the general idea of exile, through the descent of the neshama into the body. It's similar to the idea of imprisonment. The soul descending into the body is similar to going to prison, because the neshama is limited; it can't express itself fully, etc., etc. Like a person that's in prison is limited by what they can do and where they can go. Like it's explained in the Maimer Baruch HaGoimel that my father-in-law really got upset when he went out of imprisonment, and he explained that there's the 4 people that have to say HaGoimel, that have to bring a carbon titan time to the basic Mikdash. One of them is someone that goes to prison, and the Friedrich Rebbe said it because he went to prison, but he also explained the spiritual idea of imprisonment and the spiritual idea of all the other things that one says before, and he explained the spiritual idea of imprisonment as the neshama coming down to the body. So just like Yosef was imprisoned, each one of us are imprisoned, and through Yosef refining the sparks when he was in Mitzrayim, he brought the Geula and the case of even Mashiach's times. Same thing, each one of us, through our imprisonment in the body and refining the sparks, through this we affect the idea that the darkness will be placed an end to it, that there will be the Geula Mitzvah Shleima immediate.